Hello everybody and welcome to the British Pine. My name is Christoph and today we're tasting the Burton Bridge Top Dog Stout that I have been brewing 3 months ago. It took me ages to be happy with this beer. Basically it took the beer ages for me to be happy with it because the yeast that I used, the Lallemand Verdant yeast, was precipitating basically not at all. It's gotten much better now. It's almost clear now, very little haziness to it. It has a dark color now, much better than it was. It was really murky brown. I might show you some of the clips that I did for the first tasting, which was after 1 month after the brewing. So now it's 3 months later, and I did a mistake there. So it's not just the yeast that was difficult. While fermenting, the yeast looked really vital, flocculating, very similar to Y yeast 1469 in the way that it really tries to crawl out of the fermenter, very flocculent yeast. And then it stayed in suspensions for months. So sometimes I do a forced fermentation test, and that is basically a test where you have a little syringe and it shows you, because if things ferment much faster in there than in your beer, what the final gravity will be, and then you know when you cool this down or cold crash, or you just do it in your bag in the box that I use, add sugar and everything. You know what you're doing because you know what the final gravity is and will be. Especially for me, who very often just transfers it when it seems to be calmed down or when you expect a bit too much extract still to be in there, but that's what you want to use for your carbonation in your cask ale. So the problem here was that the Verdant yeast seems to be extremely slow. It really is a true descendant of the London Ale3, which is famous for needing tons of oxygen to really finish fermentation in the end. I found some data in the German Facebook group where they discussed this topic right after I made my own experiences, that basically the yeast chucks through 90% of the fermentables really quickly, 2 or 3 days, and then it takes a week for the rest, which is really long. So what I did is I transferred it to my bag-in-box too early, and then when the carbonation seemed right, I cooled it down. And yeast does not always like being cooled down, and it doesn't always flocculate. It really depends on the yeast strain. With this one, as like many weakly sedimenting yeasts, you have the issue that you need the yeast to be inactive. It needs to understand that there's no sugar left to eat before it actually starts precipitating. And when you have some sugar still left there that the yeast can use, it will stay in suspension for a long time. And I didn't try going to 4 degrees Celsius, which sometimes I do, but it rarely helps with some of the issues I had. So what I did basically was put the carton back into a warmer room. Of course, it inflated. I have difficulties with pressure on these carton boxes, so I had to release and vent it, which is just really risky procedure with these cartons. You don't want to have it pop. It wasn't every beer that I brew, it's just once, twice every year that I have this issue when I underestimate the complexity of how the yeast behaves. And the easy solution is a forced fermentation test. You might have seen the penultimate video, or rather the penultimate beer, the 2 videos before this one, where I described how I finished the Belhaven's Best clone in 3 weeks because I did a forced fermentation test. I knew exactly when the beer had finished, or rather I knew when the gravity was exactly how I wanted it, put it in the bag-in-box, and it could ferment the rest within 2 weeks and everything was fine. So that's what you want to have. Okay, so now we have the beer in a condition that is drinkable. In the murky, pale brown version, it was incredibly astringent and bitter, extremely like that, and really not tasty. And I would have said, oh my god, the roasted malt is really harsh, but it isn't the roasted malt. Lallemand Verdant yeast apparently is a very bitter tasting yeast, while many other yeasts are more in the sour or sometimes even neutral kind of flavor. Especially when yeast is active, it tastes usually very badly. So let's see what we smell and taste. You can see the foam is still there, but it has declined quite a lot. I have been setting up the camera after doing this nice introductory shot that I did for you. And yeah, quite foam stable, but not incredibly foam stable. It's not like a wheat beer. No yeasty off smell, which is really nice. I just smell a very bit of chocolate. Actually, this layer of foam tends to be a hampering smell quite a lot, so usually I would swirl it, but it's so full that this is a bit difficult. Oh yeah, a bit of roastiness. I do not smell any sweetness, and there was no crystal malt in it, so that matches. I don't necessarily smell any hoppiness either. I think this was bittered with Pilgrim, so not very thoroughly. not with an aromatic hop, just very little amount of hops. No aromatic hop at all. Very simple, very clean. What I'm expecting is some flavors from the yeast. You might have noticed in the last video I fermented at 20 degrees, which is very, decent, very calm. I should have gone to 21 degrees or maybe even 22, but I'm not an expert with this strain. I think 21 is really easily done with London Ale 3. But 20 degrees for something that, for a beer that ferments really strongly, so that you can expect some heat from the fermentation, even though my fermenter is really small, should be there. I just want to make sure that the fruitiness I get is really the fruitiness and not any fusels. And with dry yeast, my experience is that you do not get any fruitiness at all. Okay, I talked a lot. I don't smell any fruitiness, so let's try this and see what it tastes like. Oh yeah, there's a noticeable fruitiness. Peach, I would say. Very similar to the Irish ale yeast, Wise 1084. And it tastes so much better than before. I notice a very little bit of bitter astringency in there, which might be the high amount of roasted malt, though 6% of chocolate malt is not a lot. But the different malts have different thresholds. I like black malt a lot because it is so roasted that there's really not any off flavor with it. You just get a bit of clean roastiness. Chocolate malt, much more complex, really chocolatey. I taste it just as I like it. If you've seen my review of the Brexit Porter, very similar. That was really full chocolate flavor. This one is a bit more, a bit darker, a bit roastier, a bit edgier maybe, a bit harder on the edges. So less smooth. That's what I want to say. And this is fitting to the stout style, but might not be everyone's favorite preference. Flavor is so much nicer. You have a bit of sweetness from the malt that comes. It's the first thing you really notice. So it's very full and sweet. The foam is just enough that you have a bit of mouth-filling creaminess. And then you have the esters from the yeast, which are really not bad. I have to say that. I was expecting a bit more towards, what was it, apricot, I think? Or is it even apple that it is described with? It's very clear peach with a bit of underlying complexity. Not as clean as the Irish ale, which was just peach, in my opinion. Which was not bad, actually. I would recommend that for a pale ale. This one, really complex, gives a good character to the beer, and you have to remember this is a dry yeast, so very, very yeast forward, very aromatic yeast, which encourages me to use it again, were it not for this very difficult way of handling it. Maybe I'm going to try to use it again. I might actually use the liquid version, the London Ale 3 first, because I have accidentally bought it when I wanted to buy the other London Ale. And I might just do a few of these IPA, maybe hazy IPA kind of beers. The problem is with these especially that I have drunk a lot of IPAs that I do not like and very few that I like, so it's very difficult style of beer to get in a way that I like it and that you can serve it out of a hand pump. Sharp Solar Wave is something that I drank and I enjoyed really thoroughly. So I'll see what I can do with this type of yeast. Seems to be really fruit forward for dry yeast, as I said, quite remarkable. I have to say this is something I'm not used to. Of course you have to do a thorough underpitching as I did and a warmer fermentation temperature. And that seems to be quite well for any type of beer. And then I'll see you next time again. Bye bye.